Hi there, my name is Augustine. I watched a couple YouTube videos on the existence of God, and I thought I'd try to put my own thoughts out there. So I am an atheist, and I just want to tell other atheists not to treat theists as if they're really, really stupid and as if their thoughts don't have any validity. I think there are plenty of compelling reasons why one would believe in God, even though I think that if you pick apart these reasons, ultimately they don't uphold scientific rigor. But that's not to say that they aren't compelling arguments, that they're very interesting, and they're not very interesting. Another thing I just want to say to atheists is to try to not oversimplify the arguments given to you, because I think a lot of the time, I don't know, everybody has a different interpretation of what God is, right? And so when you say to someone, this is a classic example, oh, how can there be a God when there's so much poverty and war and all these sorts of terrible things going on? What kind of moral God would do this to us? That might be true of a moral God, but it's not necessarily true of a creator or one who has designed us. So I just want to make that clear. So I've found two particularly interesting arguments for the existence of God that I want to discuss. Number one, the idea that something cannot come out of nothing. And number two, that nature is so complex it must be the result of a creator. And like I said before, even though I find these very interesting, I don't think that the explanation of God gives us is very scientific or very reasonable to believe in. So firstly, this idea that something cannot come out of nothing. It's reasonable. Think of this instant in time where you're listening to my little rant about God. To think that beforehand there was an infinite amount of time, and after this there will be an infinite amount of time, is mind-boggling. You think to yourself, everything we know, like in our life, like just look around, it's all finite. We have an end to our lives. We have a beginning to our lives. And so it's very difficult for the human mind to conceive of anything different or anything that's infinite. Like, it's completely, ugh. Like, I don't get it when I think about it. And when the theist wonders, they think, okay, science may give us the Big Bang as an explanation. But what happened before the Big Bang? What happened, and the atheist will ask the same thing. So we had the singularity, and then from the singularity, the universe started expanding, and so what happened before that? It boggles everybody's minds, and the theist appeals to God as the creator of the singularity, a supernatural being imposing its will on the natural world so that we get this out of this infinite regression. And I think to some extent it was kind of a good try, but there are some problems with this. First I want to discuss the scientific method. What is the scientific method? Okay, well, basically what the scientific method is, it's a generalized method that you have a hypothesis, you create an experiment, and with this experiment you gather data which will help you support your hypothesis, or it can refute it entirely. So we use this model to determine what we think is true about the outside world. There's that way, and there's also direct observation. Direct observation being something like, the Earth is round. I know this because I went to outer space and I looked at it and I'm like, oh, damn, the Earth is round. Makes sense, right? An example of something that would be supported by the scientific method would be a theory like the theory of gravity, or evolution, say. Gravity, we'll take that for example. I think that gravity exists, and it is reasonable for me to think that gravity exists because, okay, and we'll say that gravity is a tendency for a massive object to draw less massive objects toward it, sort of thing. And the less massive object will also draw the more massive object towards it, but less so. So, yeah, my theory of gravity tells me that my not-so-massive Vaseline will be drawn by my more massive book right here. See? Yeah, and we can test that in outer space. It makes sense. Like what? Like I'm not falling out of my chair or anything like that. I'm stationary in my chair, which is connected to the ground, which is connected to the Earth. My theory makes sense. And we can test this theory even further. From my theory, I can predict that the moon, for example, will have stationary rocks on it. The rocks aren't going to be floating about. Well, that's true as well. So we've come up with a hypothesis that can predict things and is supported by our data. That's how you believe in something. With this God thing, this creator from the supernatural world, there's no way of testing it. It escapes testability. And so there's no reason we should believe in it at all. Yeah. I mean, we want an explanation for the beings of the universe, but to say that a conscious being created the universe is far from an explanation. It's like it explains the universe, but there's no way of us testing it, therefore we shouldn't put our faith in it. And I want to sort of go over this idea of why it is that we should believe that it is conscious. I mean, okay, think about this. We have notions. Wait, what was I talking about? I was talking about, shit, I've completely forgotten what I was talking about. Oh, right, consciousness. Sorry. So consciousness. We think that God is conscious. Why would we think it's conscious? I mean, we have our notions of what consciousness is. We have undergone scientific processes, or the scientific method, to determine what consciousness is at all. We've opened up animal brains, we've opened up human brains, we've poked at, the ganglia of worms and things like that, to come to a scientific consensus on what we think consciousness could have arisen from. And from what we found is that consciousness originates in something material, in the brain, in neurons firing, and in chemical processes and things like that. And when you introduce consciousness to this idea of God, where does that come from? It's very problematic, because we know that consciousness is linked to material things, but now we're saying that God is immaterial, and somehow it has these cognitive processes. And we're associating all these sorts of things when we have no proof for them. I'm going to stop the video there and go on to my second idea later on, because I only have 10 minutes. And yeah, I think that my 10 minutes is approaching. So I'm going to explain my other point in a second video that will be titled on God's Existence Part 2. Yeah. Okay, bye.